Welcome everyone. Bienvenue à tous et à toutes. I'm Brian Sirois, and I'm a Global Trade Director here at Export Development Canada. It's my pleasure to host today's webinar, which I'm very excited about. I'd like to start off by mentioning that this program was developed in partnership with Google Canada. And on behalf of both EDC and Google, thank you for joining us and taking time out of your busy workday. It's difficult when you're in the midst of a global pandemic to find silver linings. The human and financial toll has been staggering. But for the next hour, let's try our best to set that aside and look at some of the positive outcomes. Whether you agree that these are positive outcomes or not, there's one thing that can't be argued. Things have changed, many of which have likely changed forever. Take Shopify, for example. As some of you might know, the Canadian multinational e-commerce phenom is headquartered here in Ottawa. Up until COVID hit, more than 1,000 employees worked from their downtown central offices on Elgin Street. But not anymore. With few exceptions, they all work from home offices now. Just last month, CEO Toby Lutke announced that Shopify would keep all of their offices closed until 2021. After that, they're anticipating that their 5,000 employees worldwide will work remotely on a permanent basis. And Shopify is not alone. Another huge shift has taken place in the retail space. While essential services remained open, all non-essential businesses were forced to close. And yes, we're seeing phased-in reopenings, but everyone is holding their collective breath, hoping that the cases don't spike back up. That doesn't mean that people stopped buying, though. They just started doing a whole lot of it online and at a staggering rate. For the brick-and-mortar retailers who also had online channels, it was a fairly easy transition for their customers to make. But for those who weren't online, sales literally stopped overnight. Or for those with inefficient online stores, sales went soft. If you fall into that latter category, take heart. You're certainly not alone. Just think about it. There are 143,000 small and medium-sized retail businesses in Canada. Surprisingly, only 17% are selling online. But 82% of Canadian consumers do their product research and make purchases online. So I hope that's the incentive you need to provide you with a virtual push. If you're wondering where to start, well, you've come to the right place, because today's webinar is an e-commerce primer. And I want you to keep these two facts in mind. First, it's not too late. And second, it's perhaps a lot easier than you think. Our panelists are going to show you the way. Sarah Scurfield is going to start things off with a look at the impact that COVID's had on the way people buy. Sarah is the e-commerce marketing lead at Google Canada, and she comes armed with some very compelling statistics, trends, and predictions. Later on in the program, she's also going to share tips on how you can build your brand across all of the various channels you use to sell your goods. She'll provide some examples so you can understand some of the best practices that are out there. You'll also hear from Tarek Ismail, the retail sales lead at Shopify. Tarek is going to talk about the importance of building an omni-channel business. And if you're not sure what this buzzword really means, stay tuned. He's going to explain what it is and why it's so important in today's retail reality. And then he's going to demonstrate how you can develop your own omni-channel strategy. Because the synergy that happens when all channels work together will ensure that you maximize your sales. After Sarah and Tarek have finished their talks, we'll open things up for our question and answer period. That's when you get to ask our experts whatever questions you might have. Keep in mind, you don't have to wait until the end of the program. Just use the question box in the webinar console and fire away at any time. We'll answer as many as we can during the broadcast and follow up afterwards if any of them go unanswered. And just one last thing to note, we've developed a resource document that's been uploaded to the webinar console. Make sure you download it because it includes links to all of the resources that both Sarah and Tarek will be talking about today. So without further delay, I'm going to turn things over to Sarah. Welcome, Sarah. Great to have you with us today.
Hi there. Thanks so much, Brian. Thank you so much for having me too. So I wanted to start off, we've been on such a wild ride, and I want to acknowledge that it hasn't been easy for anyone, and in particular, small businesses. But as Brian mentioned, today is all about arming you with tools and information. And on my side, I want to give you an idea how you can better navigate and predict what will be our new Canadian normal for your customers and for you. So I have a slide up, this slide here, and it has a lot of really disparate things on it. And I wanted to start by asking you, like, how do all of these things fit together? And I think up until last year, that would have been a really difficult question to answer. But what you're seeing here is search interest in Canada that has been growing triple digit year over year. So if you look at it, things like Lysol wipes, that sort of thing. So when I look at this data, two things come to mind for me. One, I am a total cliche. So most of these searches are definitely searches that I've done in the past few months, not unlike a lot of other Canadians. And then two, search interest is a very strong indicator of demand in Canada. And so I'm going to give you a couple of tools to help you use that as well. But essentially what you're seeing here is the story of what's happened over the last few months, right? Like we're trying to figure out what to do, and we're seeing a run on things like Lysol wipes. We were seeing that in searches. And then as we were staying home more and more and our kids were having to be homeschooled, we had to figure out the technology aspect of it. So searching laptops and Chromebooks and all these sorts of things. And then as we were home more and more and staring at our walls or doing whatever we were doing, we saw these rises in hobbies. Things like, for some reason, a lot of vintage hobbies. We were seeing telescopes and, the popularity of the 1990s rollerblades and skateboards were coming back in droves. Home improvement, things like driveway sealants and vinyl siding had 1,000% year-over-year growth. And then finally, one that I thought was really interesting was this rise of, yes, bike stores near me, but just near me and proximity in general. And the reason I bring this up is because we're talking about e-commerce and omnichannel here. And just even from personal experience, I was one of those people did a bike shop near me search. I have a 5-year-old son who needed a new bike. And it was this almost a silver lining where you're seeing the rise of e-commerce and that need, but paired with this local general store feel. So I was able to call a bike store near me, give them my son's age and size, and then the person directed me to their site or their inventory. We picked a bike together, I paid, and then they dropped it off in my backyard. So just these little intersections that are starting to happen and accelerate during this period of time. Slide 2, please. So in all, things are rapidly changing as we're trying to figure out what the new normal is. And search can be a really big help for this in terms of understanding what it is. But before I get into that, I wanted to refer to some research that we had done with Ipsos. It helps you just get a better sense of how we can best service consumers. And consumers' behavior has been evolving online for a lot of years now, but this is really shifting. And one stat that really stuck out for me was that 33% of Canadians expect to shop more online post-COVID. And so that just means this is going to last. And as you look at things, make sure you're really looking at that as well. Slide 3, please. We also look at something called contactless shopping. And what that is Canada has this high demand for contactless shopping. So when you're looking at opening your store or progressing your store, we over-index amongst a lot of other global countries as well. So contactless shopping is really important. Slide 4, please. And then I don't think this will be any surprise to any of you, but free shipping is beloved by Canadians. 62% of Canadians say free delivery is only going to become more important. And I bring this up because the global average is about 50%. So we really over average in this. And it's even more challenging for Canadians because we have such a vast geography that shipping is a huge challenge for us. So I think as you build out, really think about how you can work with your suppliers, how you can work with your site builders to figure out how to incorporate free shipping into your margin, if at all possible.
And Sarah, I'll just ask a quick question there, if you don't mind. So is there a certain threshold that, free shipping on orders over $30, $50, is there a magic number, or does it really depend on the category?
It really depends on the category. I mean, I think there's a rule of thumb that the higher the price point, the more it's expected. But my big advice there would be to try out some testing around what that threshold is for your industry, for sure.
Great. Thanks.
All right, so we're going to go to slide 5 here. A big benefit for smaller brands during this time is that Canadians have been a lot more open to trying new brands and retailers. This is a huge opportunity for us because it's creating new habits, if you think about it, right? Like we all had our ingrained habits of how things worked when we were potentially commuting and the kids were in school and everything was as it was. But now we have this new normal and we're open to new things. And there's a huge potential there. And if you go to slide 6, another big opportunity here is this huge rising of supporting local, right? And if you think about your own behavior and how people are going more to, if you call it your high street or your main street or your local businesses, the survey is really showing that Canadians are more and more open to this. But I would say one thing I would note here is it's not just about the goodness of our hearts, right? Like we all love our communities and want to support them, but it's more than that. It's things like proximity. Like we don't want to venture so far from our houses anymore, and we don't need to. And it's also things like stock availability. We went through this big tear where it was hard to find things. So if we can just place a call to our local store or know where this product is coming from, it makes it a lot easier for us to navigate. So this is a big opportunity for small businesses. On slide 7, one thing that has remained consistent over my years in e-commerce, I think probably 10 years or more, is this mismatch in what we're seeing in the data. So for instance, in Canada, we often see that Canadians have really high expectations and digital usage. So you just have to think of your own behavior. We're big adopters of digital, if you will. But where the mismatch comes in is that, Brian, I think you referenced this, that 17% only of small to medium-sized businesses are e-commerce sites. And so you look at this, and we've got this gap, right, of expectation to what we're delivering. And so this period of time, as difficult as it is, it's also forcing us all to meet that consumer demand at a faster pace. And so when you're going into this and you're thinking about how you're adapting, there's a few things I would think about. It's not only how can you just meet the minimum threshold, but it's like how can you get right up to where the Canadian customer is? And it's things like the ability to check stock. Can you do e-commerce and in-store in the same go? And just have this level of transparency when you're talking with your customers, because we do have these high expectations.
Nobody wants to roll the dice when they hit add to your cart, right?
Exactly. Or worse yet, you don't want to show up at a store and it's not in stock if we're talking omnichannel.
Right. Yeah.
So if we pop over to slide 8, I was referencing earlier something called Google Trends, and it is a tool that's available to everyone, but I just popped in a couple of searches ahead of this webinar to get a feel for how we can use this type of data. And so I put in some topics that are on the rise in the last few months, and I'm really able to get a view of, I wouldn't even worry too much about the graph, but what I want you to take away is that there's a couple of areas that are really popping. So things like essentials, we didn't see a lot of search on those in the past. Now we're seeing so much more search on essentials. Hobbies are on the rise. Delivery mechanisms and ways that we get things delivered has really blossomed over the last few months. But this is just a way that I'm using it, and I don't think necessarily you should take my word for it. I'd rather leave you with some tools that you can use for your industry. So on slide 9, I've put together 2 tools that I'd recommend that you take a look at after the webinar. The first one is my favorite. It's called Google Trends. And essentially what it is a database of intentions. It's Canadian search interest and it's global search interest. You can look at categories, topics, words, and it can be over a range of different periods. And I use it in a number of different ways that I think could be useful for businesses. One is looking at new products and trends. So for example, if I owned a coffee shop and I had soy milk and maybe I just introduced almond milk, I could use trends to see what else is popping. And I might see that oat milk is on the rise as well. But maybe there's a new oat milk that I don't know about yet. And I can be one of the first coffee shops to start stocking that in my neighborhood. Another way I like to use it is to prove out hunches. So if I have a business idea I'm thinking about or something I want to add to my business, you can put in your hunches into the trends and see if it actually backs it up. And the classic one that always makes me laugh is you see vodka drink recipes spike on a Friday and hangover cures spike on a Saturday. that sort of intersection, but there's a lot of really good ways that you can use it to prove out your hunches. And then really relevant to this webinar today is the third, and that is essentially, it's a really good resource to help you name your products. So a good rule of thumb is to think about naming products in the way that people search, right? So if I'm an apparel brand, I don't want to call my products apparel because that's an industry term. I want to call it clothing, right? And we know that if you've gone outside at any time recently, you'll notice that biking shorts are on the rise. Like the 1980s seem to be back in a big way. Do I call them cycling shorts? Do I call them biking shorts? Like, how should I refer to these? And all of that is possible to see the popularity in Google Trends. So it's a huge way to use this tool. And then the final one I would leave you with in terms of free and available tools is something called Google Alerts. And what it allows you to do is go deeper in your industry. So for instance, if there is a product, an industry, a company that you want to follow, it will essentially send you an email every day consolidating all of the news releases from that area. So Tarek and I work in e-commerce and omnichannel. We might want to follow, Walmart, Shopify, Google, EDC, whatever it might be. You can put alerts in your feed, and then we'll get an alert every day on that. So that's where I wanted to leave it for now. And then I'm going to pass it back to you, Brian. And I think, Tarek, we want to hear more from you about the fundamentals of omnichannel and e-commerce.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot for that, Sarah. What a shift we're living through right now. And it's great to know that so many of these tools are available. Thanks a lot for that. So now let's hear from Tarek about building an omnichannel business. And actually, before you do that, Tarek, why don't you give us a quick overview of Shopify?
Yeah, totally. So I'm sure everyone here is already very familiar with Google, and it's likely that you're just getting familiarized with Shopify for the first time. So let's start there. So if you don't know, we are a Canadian company headquartered in Ottawa, and today we have about 6,000 people on our team, and we're supporting 1 million businesses all over the world. And for us, the goal in working with these businesses is to make commerce better for them and for everyone. We do, however, we like to talk about our mission in a bit of a different way, and this comes from our CEO, Toby. And that mission is to arm the rebels. So by that, what we mean is when we look into the future, we see a scenario where maybe a small handful of large mega corporations own and sell everything, and they employ everyone. And honestly, that's the exact timeline that we're trying to avoid. So we really believe that healthy economies, just like healthy communities and societies, they're naturally quite diverse. They're also quite colorful, and that actually makes very resilient systems. So that's what we want to build. And to do that, we want to equip every single business with the tools that will allow them to thrive and compete. And those are tools that usually you'd only expect to see with Amazon or Walmart, for example. So today, at its core, Shopify is this incredibly flexible platform that makes running your business as easy as possible. And I specifically say as easy as possible because I think most people here know that running a business is never easy at all, but we try to make it easier every single day. And one of the big reasons I think that Shopify is getting so much love right now is that we do allow businesses to be actually omni-channel. Now, if you're not familiar with that term, what I mean by that is that businesses are no longer confined to the four walls of their store. They extend well beyond that across different channels where their customers may already be engaging. So of course, the physical store is one of those. The website is another. The email inbox is another. Instagram, Facebook, Google, Pinterest, eBay, even Amazon, some pop-ups, markets, actual physical events. And soon you're going to see other channels come up, actually quite soon, like AR, VR, 3D. People may be shopping from their watches or their glasses. We know that's coming. So right now your customers are online. They may be on social media. They may be on email. They may be on their phone. And what we found is that the retailers who are winning in 2020, and specifically through the pandemic, are the businesses who are able to reach them right then and there. They're not waiting around for them to show up. So regardless of where the customers are, you need to be able to engage with them and be able to deliver that really compelling, unique brand story that I think most of the businesses are actually built around, the story that makes you, you. And across any of these channels, deliver that story and convert loyal customers. Now, at every touch point when you're interacting with them in the system, you're going to be gathering this information. And that information is going to allow you to further personalize and improve their shopping experience. So you can offer something that's easy, fun, rewarding, and for the consumer, for your customer, a totally frictionless, fun experience. Now, the data that we've seen actually speaks for itself. The businesses who are doing this well, they grow upwards of 50% faster. So that's 50% higher growth. They're getting more traffic, they convert more customers, the cart sizes are higher, and they also have much higher customer loyalty. And you can think of examples of brands that do this very well, but the reality is you don't have to be Apple or Nespresso to make this work. I'll actually share a bit of a personal story with you. My wife and I are big, not too big, but we're fans of wine. And specifically, we like buying locally. Ontario has a lot of great white wines and Chardonnays in particular. And one of our friends kept telling us about this winery in Prince Edward County. It's basically the only wine she'll ever drink. I don't know why, but she was obsessed with it. And so we're on a trip in Prince Edward County. We're biking around, and obviously we decide we're going to stop in. And we're at the winery, and the woman working there, Katie, is telling us all about the wine, French oak and limestone in the soil gives it the minerality. I don't know what it is, but something about that story makes the wine taste a lot better. So we love the wine. We want to order a case, and we hadn't really thought about the fact that we were on a tandem bike. Can't really bike away with a case of wine. So really nice thing right away. Katie's like, great, let me send this to your house for free. Amazing, no problem. So we're on our way, and we realized like 5 minutes later that we're not going to be back in Toronto until Monday. So we need to let them know. And with Shopify, I get the Shop app that allows me to track the delivery she's sending me. And right from that app, I can message Katie and say, hey, we're not going to be home till Monday. Please make sure the wine's not sitting, getting hot on our doorstep. And she responded within a minute. She said, no problem at all. It won't be there till Tuesday or Wednesday, whatever it was. So I'm feeling great at this point. Like, this is a really good experience. Like, you kind of love this, that someone is attending to you, and so flexible and easy while you're enjoying your vacation, biking around in Prince Edward County. But it extends well beyond that. After that initial interaction, weeks later, we finish that case of wine. We get another email from Katie that says, hey, we have a brand new Chardonnay. I've created a cart for you. I've applied a discount. Feel free to try this as well. And so for me, it's just one click, boom. Case of wine shows up the next day. Now, when the next case of wine comes, there's an actual printout and it's invitation to an event at the winery and their actual loyalty program. So we went to that event, and I'm connected with this winery on Instagram now. Like, we chat, I share their posts, and I promise you, like, I'm not that guy, but this works. And when you think about it, to be totally fair, you may sell products that maybe aren't as exciting or don't give the same dopamine rush as a bottle of Chardonnay. But I think what most business owners already know is that the experience can actually deliver that same excitement and that same reward.
Sounds like Katie's really nailing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
That was fantastic, Derek. Thanks a lot for that. You've certainly given a lot to our audience to consider. My guess is that you've given everybody quite a list of things to think about. Now, can you tell us how to go about building your business in this way? Like, what exactly does that look like?
Yeah, great question. And I think actually what's most incredible about that winery story is that there's no developers working there. There's no marketers working there. There are 3 winemakers working there, and perhaps a sales agent as well. And they're not spending money on like Facebook ads or Instagram ads, at least not directed at me. It's how they're actually using Shopify that allows for this relationship to happen. And so it's enabling them to do this without code, without like a contractor or a marketer or any huge ad budget. I mean, honestly, I think there's like 1,000 people here. I'm pretty sure you could all set this up in like within 7 days if you wanted to. So it really is that simple. And the businesses that are able to do this what we actually saw during the lockdown, they recovered 97% of the lost sales. They did 97% of their usual sales. They were virtually unaffected by the fact that they had to close their doors. So if you're an offline business right now and maybe your store is still closed, the first thing you want to do is really get your inventory information, your products, and your customer information into the platform. And again, we've made this as easy as possible. And once you have that information in there, you want to make sure you have the channels where you want to be found. So do I have a store? Great, I'll add that. Website, I'm going to add that. Maybe I want to be found on Instagram. Maybe I'm selling on Pinterest, wherever it is. Turn on the channels where I want to be found and represented. Again, it's super easy. If you're a retailer and you want to figure this out, I'm not joking, add me on LinkedIn. I'll help you set this up right away. It's that simple. But once you have it set up, like I want to share some of the stories that we saw coming out of the pandemic, the really silver lining stories. And some of these are like quick wins, do this right away and great things happen. And some of them are kind of more out of the box that we saw. And so I'll share some of these with you. And really when we talk about that 97% number, that these businesses weren't that impacted by having to close their doors, these are some of the things that they did to actually get to that 97%. So the first one, which is a no-brainer, is you want to let all of your customers know, your existing customers, that you're still open and that they can buy from you and how they can do that and how they can get their products. So you set up a quick email campaign and send it out to your existing customers. Hey, we're open. Check out our site. Check out our Instagram. You may even include a little discount code there as an incentive to get them to actually follow through. And what we're seeing, like in my experience with the businesses we work with, if you get an email out to even just 100 of your existing customers, people who already buy from you, 30 or so of those people are going to end up on your site, and 10 to 15 of those end up making a purchase. Again, these are people who bought from you anyway. You just needed to direct them to the right place. Super simple. You could set that up in 3 or 4 minutes. The second thing that we saw, and I definitely recommend this as well, during the lockdown, a lot of people who were purchasing actually hesitated because they weren't sure that they would be able to get their goods delivered or when they would even show up, if they were going to show up at all. And that's actually a reason a lot of people wouldn't make a purchase. If there's any uncertainty at all, maybe I'm going to pass. And so within Shopify, we built this real quick when the pandemic started. And these are things that you probably want to turn on. You can offer shipping, the traditional ship it to my house. You can offer local delivery, where if you're the business owner or one of the staff, you can execute same-day deliveries within your neighborhood or within your town. You can set up curbside pickup. So anyone who wants to get their products when they want them and know for sure that they're going to get them, they want curbside pickup. They're going to come to your door and meet you there. And you can even set it up to... Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you there, but how difficult is that to set up? Because that's certainly been something that personally I've seen as being one of the big things to come out of COVID in terms of being an online consumer, is the curbside pickup and the local delivery, things like that. So how difficult is that for our audience to set that up?
I mean, like everything else in Shopify, we built it. You don't actually have to worry about how to make this happen or how to set it up. Once you're in Shopify, if you want to offer curbside pickup, you can offer it and specify how that runs. So it's super simple, like turning it on. But what's really important to make note of, the reason we even built curbside pickup or local delivery is that we can see across these million businesses that people are going on sites and going to stores and they're seeing products and they're adding them to a cart and they're ready to make this order, but they're not actually making the order. And we discovered that it was because they weren't sure about shipping. So we said, we want to make sure every possible customer goes ahead with that order and gets their products, and the business does very well. And so we need to open this up and give people options. Hey, if I don't know I can get it shipped to my house through FedEx or UPS, let's give them curbside pickup and let's give them local delivery. And customers love this. Come to the front of your store, grab the product and keep driving and have to park and come in and browse and do all of that. So all these behaviors are not going to go away. It's super easy to set up. It's built in innately to the Shopify platform. Just like everything, we build these functionalities so you don't really have to worry about it. You can focus on the customer and the products that you want to get to them. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for that.
Awesome. So actually 2 more things I wanted to mention that are really important to make sure that your customers are going to engage with you now and after this lockdown is you want to make sure that you've broadened your payment options, specifically contactless and digital payments. This is the standard going forward. So you need to be offering tap and ship. You need to be offering Google Pay, Shop Pay, Apple Pay. I'm sorry to bring them into this conversation at all. And of course, cards and cash too. That will still be the case for some customers. You never want to let a lack of payment options or a concern about that lose you a sale, potentially lose you a customer. And within Shopify, again, all of these options are built right in for you to be able to offer to your own customers. And I think the last story I want to share that came out of the pandemic and COVID, and this to me was really remarkable because it's a bit more unique than the first three I mentioned. The examples of it's a boutique cosmetic shop that had to close their doors. That meant their sales basically would drop to zero that day. They didn't have another business model or a site set up to actually transact. When they shut their doors, what they actually decided to do is they emailed all of their customers and they decided to offer free video consults right through the site live with anyone who was interested. And so what happens is the customers actually end up on the website, and there's this portal that allows for this video consult with one of the sales agents who's now having a conversation about, oh, I got this burn last week on Canada Day over the long weekend, whatever it is, and recommending products right then and there. So actually they're around the clock doing these video consults, helping move product. They actually added 2 more people to their staff to do these calls, and their sales are actually higher than they had been going into the whole situation. So there's a lot of different ways to actually take advantage of this omni-channel thing. What's most important is that you have a simple platform to be able to do it, a single platform that allows you to engage across all these channels, manage a single inventory, represent your single brand to your entire customer base in a way that is seamless, automatic, and very personalized. Just to kind of wrap things up here, I really think, the idea I want to leave you with is that we've seen during the pandemic, there's a lot of uncertainty and the world is changing a lot. One day it's this way, one day it's that way. 2 months ago, they were in your store. 2 months from now, hopefully they're back in your store. Right now, they're on the couch or in the bathroom scrolling Instagram. There's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of change, and it's happening faster and faster. So for us, our goal with you and working with you is that no matter where retail goes or commerce ends up, we're going to be there first. We're going to make sure that you have the right tools at the right time to be competitive against very large players, very sophisticated, enabled players. And we want to take care of that for you so you can stay focused at the end of the day on your customers and the great products that you want to give them.
Phenomenal. Thanks a lot for that, Tarek. It was really inspiring. Tarek, you mentioned a number of different channels there. I'm wondering if maybe Sarah, if you can talk about some of the best practices in building your brand across some of these channels. So over to you, Sarah.
Yeah, actually, it's interesting to hear what Tarek's saying because it all segues really well. I think the key foundational piece is you need a really good site builder and a really good site experience for everything to work well. And so I've put up this slide here, slide 10. There's a program that's going on right now, and it's in partnership with a nonprofit called Digital Main Street. And it's called Shop Here, powered by Google. But essentially what the mission of the program is to get 50,000 Canadian businesses, small and medium sized, online by the end of the year. And the way that we're doing that is we're working with Shopify because their sites are really great to use. And as Tarek said, you need some skills to get on them, but what we're doing is we're going to be employing, and we are employing, Canadian students who are also being hit by this period of time with higher levels of unemployment to help us build those sites. And so it's a really, really exciting program. And as part of the program, these students are getting training. So they're getting training on, the best practices and fundamentals of e-commerce through Shopify. They're also getting trained by a host of digital marketers on the Google side. So once your site's set up, how do you drive traffic to your site? What is there available to you to use to get people to come visit you? So I think the key points here is that it's open to Ontario right now with the goal. It's rolling out pretty quickly across the rest of Canada. It's open to artists. It's open to businesses. We're looking for businesses with about 10 employees or less, unless you're a restaurant, and then it can go up to 25. But if you are interested, what I would ask you to do is just take a look at the site and have a look around, and you can also sign up there to get involved. So it's digitalmainstreet.ca/shop here, but it will also be as a follow-up to this webinar. And as part of that, Brian, sorry, were you going to say something? Saw your mouth open there. Okay. So slide 11 here. What I wanted to talk to you about today was, as part of this Shop Here Powered by Google program, we've put together this digital starter kit. And so the good news is, when you have a foundational site in place and you're ready to go, there are a lot of resources, but also it's the bad news because it can be very overwhelming. And so what this starter kit aims to do is just to give you a set of resources to help you get started across a whole host of different areas. And I wanted to use the time here today with all of us just to talk about my three key takeaways from the starter kit. And when I'm working with smaller businesses and helping consult them to get online, these are the types of things that we advise. So they are: 1, get to know your business profile, and I'll go into more detail on that. 2, start building your brand digitally right away. And 3, start with marketing. And there's a whole host of ways that you can get started right from the very beginning.
So Sarah, we're not at the Q&A yet, but I have been seeing some of the questions, and a lot of them I think is what you're about to touch on. So is this, you're kind of touching on the companies who really have very little to no experience in terms of selling online. This is kind of the start from A, go to Z kind of thing, right?
Yeah, and a lot of this is from programs like Grow with Google, where we deal with very small businesses that either have a presence or they're just growing their skills in this area. So I'm just pulling some of these key takeaways, and there's always resources to go deeper, but I think there's a few things that we all should have as kind of the fundamentals. So the first one is what I think is the most important, and that's slide 12 that we're looking at here. And it's this this portal called Business Profile on Google, and you may also know it as Google My Business, because that's what it used to be called. And think of this as almost like an extra storefront on Google. So if you think of your own consumer behavior, oftentimes if you're looking for something like, Thai food near me, up will pop a restaurant. And even without leaving the experience, you'll be able to see things like their hours, do they do takeout, what kind of takeout, all sorts of information without even having to go to their site. So if you're a business and you're listening and you just haven't got to the step where you've gone e-commerce, this is still your digital storefront and kind of the start of how you would get into that. And then, so one takeaway, if you haven't done this in a while after this, is just log into your business profile and have a look. But it's things like your hours, like did you reduce your hours or extend your hours during this period of time? Make sure you update in there, because that's the first place people look. I think we got about 1.5 billion hits on this. If you can imagine, it's just a lot of traffic and eyeballs, and it's really good for small businesses because there's no cost to it. The other piece is your phone number. So make sure you've confirmed your phone number. You can also opt in to get texts from customers. So if you want to create another communication path with customers through here, you can. Third would be posting updates. So for instance, if you sell Hydro Flasks, and we know there's been this huge run on Hydro Flasks recently, and you get a shipment in, you could post that you have Hydro Flasks in stock, or anything that's new and pertinent to your customers. This is a good place to post updates. And then finally, there's attributes. So Tarek had mentioned things like curbside pickup, delivery, takeout, and the ability to have all of those through Shopify. Well, there's a really nice way to also surface them through your business profile, so that when somebody pulls it up on their phone, they can get a really good feel from your business right off the bat.
Right, and a lot of those things I think are, even those things are still kind of scary to some people. So how difficult is it to do that? Like, how quickly can you go and update your hours, and how quickly can you go and update that, you've received this new inventory?
Yeah, so I mean, the hardest part is logging in and getting this verified. If you haven't had your business profile verified, oftentimes it will require you doing some sort of check, whether it's getting a postcard in the mail, just something to make sure that you're a valid business. But once you've got that all set up, it's really easy. You can even do it from your phone. Yeah, I had a colleague whose mother works at a grocery store, and you can imagine how much change they've had over the last little while. And she walked her, baby boomer mother through this whole thing. Like, it was pretty straightforward. So there's a lot of resources out there for all of us, no matter what our level of comfort in this space is. The one other thing I would mention about this, Brian, before I move on to the next one, is there's also something we've added, which are these marketing templates. So for instance, if you're a business that has made pretty significant changes over time that you want to communicate to your customer base, there's these fairly attractive or nicely designed templates that you can access, and you can make them either into social posts or you can print out a poster. And so if it's extending your hours or now open or any of those messages, it's a really quick way to get your messages out, and you can access all of that from the same place. So if you go to slide 13, the next tip from this starter kit that I love is the idea about brand building. And this can often feel daunting, but it's the idea of really figuring out what your unique value proposition is for your customer. And it can be everything from the product descriptions that you write to the storytelling of your story of how you came to be. But really, ultimately, what you're trying to do is create customer loyalty and make sales, right? And there's various levels of comfort and sort of sophistication around this, but the one thing that I love that Google offers that's in this kit is something called Primer. So for those of you that haven't heard of it, it's this digital skill course, essentially, and it's on your phone. So it's an app you download, but why I really like it is it's snackable content. So if you're riding the bus or you've got just like 5 or 10 minutes, you can take a little course on brand building, for instance. And so when you don't want to start at the very top with some of these courses and you just need kind of the basics, Primer is a really good option. And then if you're at the point in your business where you have some video content or you're playing around with social and you want to figure out what to do in terms of video, we also have this host of YouTube certified creators. And so we have a directory that you can access, and you can work with somebody in your community or somebody within that database. And information involved in that is in the kit as well. Yeah, and then if we go to slide 14, the last piece, and it's definitely not the last because you should be starting right from the beginning, is how you are marketing this site that you've set up. So, the old saying, if you build it, they will come, certainly doesn't work in the digital space, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's all paid marketing, right? So from the very moment that you start building your site, that's when the marketing starts as well. And the one key piece here is something called search engine optimization. And that is really foundational because it's the skill of being able to create a site that is easily read, scanned, and discovered by Google and other search engines. And so it allows you to be seen and discovered by your customers within these spaces. And there's a lot of learning you can do here, and sometimes too much, I think, but some really good resources would be, if you're working with Shopify, they have some great content on this. We also have a hub called the Webmaster Console, and there's a lot of really good programming in there. So I would say just if you're starting anywhere in marketing, that would fall into the foundational piece. The other, if you go to slide 15, I always think of SEO or search engine optimization as the marathon. So you got to train, it's long-term, you're in it for the long haul, but there's also other tactics that you can use that are more like sprints. So for instance, if you're having a flash sale or you're clearing out back to school inventory or something like that, there's a lot of marketing tactics that are a lot more agile, and you can use them as you need in different various capacities. So one is email, and this is a huge because you want to start growing your email list right from the get-go, right? Like this is your most loyal customers, and whether you're sending them emails with newsletters or thank yous and confirmations after they make a purchase, you get into this regular content marketing cadence with them. And then when you have something promotional, it feels very natural to start introducing that into the mix. And then the other one is Google Ads. And the thing about Google Ads that I love is that you can start at any budget and you only pay when they take an action. So it's if they take a click or they visit your site, that's when you are paying for Google Ads. But if you go to site or slide 16, whenever I work with businesses, the one thing that I always advise that they do is to really understand your business model, because you don't want to spend any money on ads unless you understand the value of taking that action, because so much of marketing now is automation based. And so I would take some time to really think out, like, whether, you know, it's on a piece of paper or whatever it is, like, what is the value to your business to drive a website, to get a phone call, to get somebody to visit your store, or, you know, the most classic one is to drive an online sale. So if you put $1 in, how much do you need to get back for that to be profitable for you? And once you have that number, because of the way that marketing works across all of these digital platforms now, it's almost like a GPS in a car, right? Like, you put in your address in the car, which would be your goal. So I might say, like, I'm willing to pay $5 to get somebody to visit my store. And then the system will go out and it will find as many people as possible to visit my store for that $5 rate. But similar to a GPS system in a car, if you don't know what your address is or your final destination, then you're going to send it on a wild goose chase, and it's going to be a complete waste of time or money or whatever it might be. So that would be a big takeaway from the marketing side of things from my end.
And Sarah, does the toolkit, does it have some resources that can help our listeners determine what that number is?
It does. And there's also further learning if you want to go into things like analytics and figuring that out. But oftentimes it's not even really a digital thing, it's a business thing. So for instance, if you're a business and you have a margin, you want to make sure that you're not spending too much on marketing, that it's eroding all of your profits. And so we look at something called a return on ad spend or a return on investment, which would be similar to what you would use for anything that you're doing within your business environment.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So if you go to slide 17, I just wanted to summarize for you what this starter kit is and what I would take away from it. And one is, if you do anything out of this webinar, from my section at least, it's visit your business profile and make sure that it's up to date and that you're maximizing those opportunities there. 2, just have a look around Primer and some of that educational content on building your brand digitally and just get started there. And then 3, have a really good think or be thoughtful about when you launch your site, or if you have launched your site, what your goals are from a marketing perspective, and get started with some of the free and then also into the more agile paid environment from that perspective. So with that, I just would encourage you to have a look at the starter kit, and I could happily pass it back to you now, Brian.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot for that, Sarah. You certainly make it seem very easy, which I suppose you could say that Google simplified a number of complex processes, which certainly make it easier than ever for businesses to thrive online. So that brings us to the last segment of today's broadcast, which is our question and answer period. We've already received lots of input, so thanks to everyone who sent in questions so far. And remember that there's still time to reach out to us, so feel free to do that right now. So before I jump into the questions, actually, I've got my own before we go into the audience questions. I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the broadcast that I was excited to have you both here, which it was absolutely sincere. I mean, we have Google here, and then we have Shopify, which is probably the hottest thing since this heat wave began. And I'm a dad, so I can make dad jokes like that. But really what I wanted to get a sense of here is we've heard really great things from both of you, but how do both of you intersect, or how does Google work with Shopify and vice versa? So maybe I'll start with you, Tarek, and maybe Sarah can cap it off.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to say the hottest thing since Google, I suppose. But how do we work together? I mean, they work together quite seamlessly. There's 2 key areas really that I think are important to talk about. Google is the place where everyone goes online to find things. And so if you're a business there and you want those people to find you, you need to be well represented on Google, hopefully on the front page. And so with the Shopify architecture, the way the themes are built, the way the sites are built, they're actually, through our partnership with Google, perfectly designed in a way that they're very likely to get found. If you're familiar with SEO, we have great scores, great rankings. And it's because we work closely with Google. They tell us what a page that gets found looks like, and we build our pages exactly like that. So that's really key, because remember, Shopify, unlike Amazon, is not a marketplace. People aren't going to come and find all these Shopify stores. They're typically going to find them through Google if they're, a new customer for you. So that's one area. And the second area I can see a lot of Shopify businesses using Google services is the analytics, the tracking on the marketing efforts, the views. I think Google has really sophisticated tools to track these things. And I would say the vast majority of successful businesses within our ecosystem are probably using them as well.
Mm-hmm. So
anything to add to that, Sarah?
Like there's obviously big companies and a lot of really exciting things happening between the two of them, but I'm going to stick to more what I do with Shopify because I think it's pretty relevant to this group. But my role essentially is to bring the best of Google products and services to the 1.2 million plus merchants on Shopify. And I appreciate that you said it was simple what I was talking about, but it also can be very complicated. If you have a $5 budget a day versus you're a big box retailer and you have a really big budget, there's so many different products and things that you could be doing. So part of what my team does is just really try and simplify that. And I would say at the heart of what we have is, yes, the Shop Here program powered by Google is very much in concert with Shopify because they're the site builder of choice and they're helping with all of the training. So we're really excited about that. It's also that we have a really good product integration with Shopify. So if you are a Shopify site and you go into the Shopify App Store, there is an app called the Google Channel, and it's awesome. Like, maybe that's subjective, but what I think it is for small businesses is it takes a lot of the technical stuff out of it that I used to really struggle with when I worked with bigger retailers, and it automates it. So for instance, one of our best performing ads products is something called Smart Shopping, where you put in your goal, like I want to get $5 for every dollar I spend, and then it just runs. And I think the one we have with Shopify is potentially the best one in the industry. So I feel fortunate to be working with them on that.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot to you both. A number of questions that have been coming in around returns and exchanges. So Sarah, if you could maybe shine a bit of light on what you're seeing in terms of the trends and maybe some searches on return and exchange policies. And then Tarek, if you want to maybe mention from a merchant's perspective, how to best manage that, maybe even in a COVID world as well. So Sarah, if you want to start that off, please.
Yeah, can you just clarify a little bit? Is it that folks are seeing a spike in returns and exchanges, or what in particular was the?
Well, we've had a number of questions on returns and exchanges. Some of them are how to manage them and how to deal with it, but then also a number of questions around how important is it. So, is it important to be extending returns and exchanges in this environment? So, are you seeing any sort of uptick in maybe return and exchange policies and searches for that?
So I would say that, like, in terms of searches, people don't often search return policies because that would mean they were looking for return policies overall, whereas that is a very specific request to an experience that they've had individually. So I didn't see anything popping in terms of high rising trends as it pertains to exchanges and returns. As I mentioned earlier, we also have data in market with Ipsos on a regular basis, and it looks at global and then dives into Canada. And I'm just trying to think if I saw anything on returns and exchanges there, but it didn't pop up. I think the general theme that I saw within the research was more about transparency. So, like, are you communicating that you have a longer exchange period during this time? Like, people have these concerns around their ability to get the inventory into their hands, but then also once they get it, is Canada Post shipping back again? So it's more about transparency is what the research was telling me.
Okay, that's a great takeaway for the audience. Thank you.
Yeah, I can build on that as well. So like generally speaking, you want to have obviously a great returns and exchanges policy so you can form great relationships with every person who buys from you. We know that's important. And what we actually saw during the lockdown is the consumers kind of had this understanding, sympathy, or empathy towards the businesses they're buying from that, hey, yeah, like maybe you can't honor the returns during this time. I'm okay with that. And so it's nice to have that, but that's not ideal. You want to put your customer first at all times. And so within Shopify, what's really important is to be able to execute those returns and exchanges wherever they happen, wherever the purchase happened to occur. Because like we discussed, that could be right from Instagram or Pinterest or Google or the site or the store, for example. So you want to make sure you're able to honor those returns. And within the Shopify ecosystem, there's probably 100 apps related to returns and exchanges. And depending on your vertical, that will look a little bit different. So it's really important to have it. And I think the one thing that Sarah mentioned that resonates quite a bit is the communication piece. During this pandemic, pretty much every business made some adjustments to their return policies. And the ones that did not have any issues were the ones who communicated it clearly and upfront. And the ones who ended up in difficult conversations hadn't really communicated it properly, which is understandable. There's a lot going on, definitely a lot going on. But you want to make sure that your customers all know. And so whether that's through an email send out, whether you tell them at the store when they buy, however you want to do it, make sure they're aware of what the policy is right now and when it may go back to normal and what that might look like as well.
Sounds like you're both touching on the transparency piece, so that's key takeaway here for the audience. Can we maybe talk a little bit about cost for both of you? A few people have sent in questions around what it might cost to use your platforms. So Sarah, maybe quickly what the cost might be to run the platforms, and Tarek, there's probably quite a few nuances there in terms of which add-ons you have, which services you're using, but if you could maybe give a bit of an overview. So Sarah, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so from a Google perspective, obviously it varies depending on where you are in your life cycle of using the products and services. But all the ones that I touched on, I highlighted whether they were free or had a fee. We never charge a fee per se. The only time you ever pay is if it's pay per performance, right? So if you think about building your business, that's something to really think about, is that marketing should be a variable cost. So if you're making money, you often have to spend money to make money. And that's where it's nice to have that flexibility, right? So all of the products I talked about, like Google Trends, Google Alerts, Business Profile on Google, all of those have no cost to them. The only ones that do are the paid marketing products. And those are variable. You pay based on a day. And you can start as low as $1 and you can go as high as you want. But if you have any questions about how to set your budget, again, I would go back to like set your goals, and that will determine what your budget is. So if you want to make $100 a day, your budget's going to be much less. But if you want to make $10,000 a day, your budget will correspond.
Right. And one of the other follow-on questions was, if I have multiple stores or multiple locations, do I need multiple accounts, or can that be managed with one?
Yeah, that's getting a little bit more complex. The way it works with Google is you could probably just have one and then have a lot underneath it, but it would also depend on your site builder relationship and, have you built individual accounts with Shopify or your other site builders, or how that's all set up. But I think the key takeaway there, Brian, is that there's just a lot of flexibility based on what you are.
Excellent, thanks. Tarek?
Yeah, definitely happy to share some information about our pricing. I mean, ultimately, we're super transparent. So feel free to go on our website or Google right now and search Shopify pricing. You'll find everything you want to know. But the summary is there's a range. We work with 1 million businesses. Some are printing T-shirts in the next bedroom, and some are international retailers with thousands of locations, perhaps. So depending on what you need, this could look quite different. Generally speaking, this sits between $50 a month and $2,000 a month, that being the very high end. So there's definitely tiered packages. And if you're someone who's still warming up to these ideas and you just want to try it out, $10 a month, you can set up a store and sell a few products quite easily just to feel it out. There's also free trials as well. But if you're a large sophisticated retailer, you're probably saying closer to 2,000 a month, and you need a lot of custom stuff built out and integrations, and we can do that as well. But what's really important to note first at Shopify, everything we do is month to month. We don't want businesses on our platform if they're not absolutely pleased, satisfied, and happy with the experience. We want to win your business every single month, and we don't want there to be any other reason for you to have to stay with us and keep working with us. So really important to know that we operate on a month-to-month basis. And the second thing to know is that for us, because we have this huge range and spectrum of businesses, the goal is to pick you up wherever you happen to be. Maybe that's at $50 today. We want to grow you into a large business, maybe regional, maybe in a few states or provinces, and maybe countrywide and international. Like, that's the potential here. So we're well set up with our products and services to take you along this journey. And along this journey, depending on what you're trying to build and what you're trying to do in your business, there may be different costs here or there. But for us, we're ultimately invested in your success, and you know that because we are month to month. So anytime there is an additional cost, the only reason we would ever ask you to do it is because there's significant return. This is going to bring you a lot of new customers. This is going to save you 30 hours a week. It's a no-brainer. You may not need to have 5 staff working on your site if you switch to this. So we're also there to hold your hand through this journey and make recommendations for you that at the end of the day are going to help you grow your business in the best way possible.
Awesome. Thanks for that. And Derek, just a quick point of clarity, is that USD or Canadian dollars? Some people have asked that as well.
That is in USD.
Okay, excellent. So that's all the time we have for today. Big thank you to the audience. That was a highly engaged audience we had today. Some really good questions. We'll be following up with a few more. Also worth noting that all the participants will receive a copy of the presentation following today's broadcast. Also like to say a big thank you to Sarah and Tarek for sharing their expertise with us. And you again to our audience for letting us into your busy workday. We really appreciate you investing the time to spend with us today. I hope our webinar has demonstrated how important and how it can be easy to sell online, especially during these difficult times. We'll be sending you a survey tomorrow morning requesting your feedback on this webinar. If you have the time to respond, we'd certainly appreciate it. And please let us know about the specific business challenges you're facing right now due to the pandemic. If you have any questions in the meantime, please give us a call at 1-800-229-0575. Again, that's 1-800-229-0575 to speak with one of our trade advisors.